The one who let out this scream was none other than the third aunt, who had originally been fast asleep. Everything was normal before the little ant went to sleep. In the middle of the night, third aunt heard some rustling noises and thought it was Iozu getting up. This child usually didn't get up to go to the bathroom at night, so why did she get up tonight? By the light of the moon outside the window, she saw 9-year-old Iozu getting out of bed. Third aunt thought her sister was just going to the bathroom, so she didn't pay much attention and turned over to continue sleeping. After about the time it takes to smoke a cigarette, third aunt was suddenly awakened because she didn't feel her sister returning to bed. She turned her head to look. What she saw made her nearly petrified with fear. Her sister was kneeling in front of the window, facing the moon outside. This sight, in the dim moonlight, thoroughly scared her awake. She adjusted her clothes, coughed to muster some courage, but there was no response. Third aunt, who had always been timid and could be scared half to death by a mouse, softly called out, Zoo. But the kneeling sister remained unresponsive. Third aunt raised her voice and called again, Zoo. What's wrong? Her sister still didn't respond. She quickly got out of bed, not bothering to put on shoes, and rushed to her sister. With bare feet, she walked a few steps to her kneeling sister, placed her hand on her back to turn her around, but found that her usually weak sister couldn't be moved. By the moonlight, third aunt moved to the front and saw the most unforgettable scene of her life: her sister kneeling, chewing on a white candle used for lighting. Back then, rural areas often had no electricity, so candles were used as a substitute and were used sparingly. At this moment, her little sister was chewing on the candle, her face pale, her eyes vacant and lifeless, staring motionlessly at the moon. Third aunt let out a loud scream of a lifebot. This scream woke up her grandparents and a married uncle, and also awakened the calamity that was predicted when little aunt was born. When her grandfather, wrapped in a coat, rushed into their room, third aunt was already speechless. With a flick, the light was turned on, and at that moment, little aunt had fainted on the ground, the candle bites clearly visible. When her grandfather picked up his daughter, he was also shocked to see her pale face and the candle in her mouth. The whole family turned their eyes to the third aunt, who was sitting on the floor. Her grandmother pulled her up. What happened? What's wrong with your sister? Third aunt, already completely frightened, could only tremble, her teeth chattering, indicating she had seen something terrifying. Her grandfather placed the unconscious little aunt on the bed, while her grandmother held the trembling third aunt. Her 12-year-old uncle held a little black dog, which started barking frantically as soon as it entered the room, adding to the eeriness. Annoyed, her grandmother told her uncle to take the dog out, but the dog continued barking outside the door, refusing to come in. Frustrated by the barking, her grandmother shouted at the dog, "If you keep barking, I'll slap you." Strangely, after the show, the black dog was so scared that it urinated and ran back to its kennel with its tail between its legs. After a while, third aunt calmed down and told her grandparents what she had seen, making their hair stand on end. After recounting her experience, third aunt couldn't help but start crying again, but her grandmother told her out, "No crying." Third aunt could only stifle her fear, breathing heavily. After a while, little aunt began to move vaguely and then started vomiting, throwing up a mix of foul-smelling substances, including the recently eaten candle and partially digested dinner, a colorful and nauseating sight. Her grandmother knew a bit of traditional medicine, but it was late, so she made some cuding tea for little aunt. I had this cuding tea at my grandmother's house when I was young. It was very effective for treating indigestion in children. It involved drying the skin of the chicken gizzard raised at home, adding tea leaves, and roasting them on an iron plate over a fire until burnt, then grinding them to mix with water. It was said to dispel evil spirits and aid digestion. Her grandmother used this folk remedy, but little aunt clenched her teeth tightly, refusing to swallow, and occasionally spat out the little she drank. In the end, with no other options, her grandfather pried open little aunt's mouth while her uncle held down her kicking legs, and her grandmother forcibly poured in a significant amount. After the tea was ingested, little aunt quieted down for a while, but third aunt dared not sleep again. So her grandparents stayed in little aunt's room to keep her company while third aunt and her uncle slept in their room. Little aunt seemed a bit more alert and stopped vomiting, but started having diarrhea. This repeated until dawn, with her grandparents staying up all night until they could rush to the town health clinic the next morning. When at the clinic, the staff said it seemed like food poisoning and treated little aunt with enrollment for acute gastroenteritis. The nurse had just inserted the needle when little aunt yanked it out, refusing to cooperate. In the end, they had to switch to intramuscular injections, with her grandfather holding her tightly to prevent her from moving. After a half day of struggling, little aunt could only vomit bile, and the town clinic advised taking her to a better-equipped county hospital. That afternoon, her grandparents, along with her uncle and little aunt, took a bus to the county. On the bus, since little aunt got car sick, her grandmother sat with her by the window. The bus was crowded with people trying to get on, including her uncle and grandfather. Her grandmother opened the window for some fresh air, but little aunt suddenly jumped out of the window, caught by her quick-eyed grandfather outside. Crying and shouting, little aunt said, "Mom, take me home. This illness can't be cured. I'm going to die. Take me home." No matter how her grandfather coaxed her, she kept crying and refused to get on the bus. She was only 9 that year. This was something my uncle told me later because he was there. Little Aunt told me she remembered nothing except having a serious illness when she was young. Her grandfather put Little Aunt back through the window, and her grandmother held her tightly, ignoring her cries. The bus carrying the anxious family slowly headed toward the county. At the county hospital, they presented the referral from the town clinic, and the hospital quickly arranged for Little Aunt to be admitted. The doctors checked her and started treating her for food poisoning. During the treatment, Little Aunt tried to escape the hospital multiple times. In the end, her grandmother had to tie her with cloth strips, and they took turns watching her, even letting her use the bathroom in a ward to prevent her from leaving. In 1986, everyone was generally poor, and the hospital also had a canteen. Initially, every meal her grandmother brought from the canteen was either overturned or left untouched by Little Aunt, who relied solely on room and floor fluids. On the third day of hospitalization, her grandmother went to get lunch from the canteen as usual, but the rice was undercooked. Strangely, this time, Little Aunt, seeing the half-cooked rice, drooled and for the first time said she wanted to eat. Her grandmother, surprised, untied her, and Little Aunt quickly devoured the half-cooked rice, asking for more. Her grandparents, aunt, and uncle all gave the half-cooked rice to Little Aunt, who ate until her stomach was bloated but still wanted more, which scared the family. Her grandmother quickly called the doctor, who, seeing her condition, insisted she couldn't eat anymore and removed her room and floor, giving her digestive tablets instead. At dinner, when the rice was properly cooked, Little Anne refused to eat again. They thought she was full from lunch, but she continued not eating on the second and third days. That night, Little Aunt still didn't eat, becoming increasingly emaciated. Her grandmother, with tears in her eyes, tried to coax her, but it was useless. Desperate, her grandmother bought another portion of half-cooked rice, and as expected, Little Aunt devoured it. The doctor couldn't explain this and only warned them not to give her such food again, as it could worsen her condition. For the next 2 days, the family didn't dare give her half-cooked rice, and the doctors were at a loss. On the 7th day, Little Aunt suddenly fainted again, started convulsing and foaming at the mouth, her heart rate and blood pressure dropping. The doctor said, "You should prepare for the worst. This child is unlikely to survive, and we don't know the illness." Her grandmother, very strong, didn't pray, saying, "She can't die in the hospital. No matter what, we must take her home." They hired a car to return home that night. On the way back, her grandmother thought of the crazy Taoist from 9 years ago and told her grandfather to find him. But it had been 9 years since the Taoist passed through. There was no phone or business card, and in such a vast world, where could they find him?